Some nights the heart feels small, the world too heavy, the mind too loud. Maybe tonight is one of those nights when courage feels far away and strength feels like something that belongs to other people. When all you want is to hide, to rest in the quiet corner of your own doubt, and hope that God passes by gently, without asking too much. If that is where your spirit rests tonight, you are not alone. Even the bravest souls have trembled in hidden places. Even the mightiest have doubted the sound of their own calling. And still, God has found them, whispered to them, and wrapped their weakness in His strength. Take a slow, deep breath. Let the weight in your chest soften. Let the shoulders fall, the jaw unclench. Let the noise inside you fade like the echo of distant thunder. In this moment, you are safe. You are held. You are being invited into peace. If these stories bring you peace, take a moment to like this video. Subscribe for more nightly reflections, and share where you're listening from tonight. Your words and presence help keep this space warm and growing. Now, take another slow breath. Let's begin. The story begins on a night much like this one. Quiet, heavy, uncertain. A young man named Gideon worked in secret, hidden in a wine press, threshing wheat where no one could see. His movements quick and cautious, his eyes darting toward the hills. For above him, the enemy moved like a shadow across the land. The Midianites had taken everything: crops, cattle, hope. And Gideon, weary from fear, was only trying to save enough grain to keep his family alive. The air was thick with dust and silence. Every sound carried meaning, every breath measured. The moon watched from behind a veil of clouds. And somewhere in the unseen distance, the people of Israel whispered prayers too tired to rise beyond their throats. Prayers that felt unanswered, forgotten. And then, the stillness shifted. A presence filled the air, gentle but vast. The way dawn fills a valley before the first light breaks. Gideon did not see it at first, but the peace came before the voice. A peace that did not belong to that fearful hour. The angel of the Lord appeared and sat beneath a tree near the winepress. His presence as quiet as starlight. And when he spoke, the words fell like water over stone. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Gideon froze, breath caught, his hands still clutching the grain. Mighty warrior. The words did not fit him. He was no soldier, no hero. He was only a frightened man hiding from the night. Yet the voice spoke as though it already saw what he could not. As though heaven spoke not to who he was, but to who he would become. The air trembled, but not with fear, with purpose, with calling, the kind that humbles the proud and lifts the weary. Gideon's heart pounded. His thoughts tangled. Why would God speak to me? Here. Like this. While I hide. But God's strength always finds the hiding places. It always calls the small and the unseen. It always begins where the world would never look. The night pressed close again. But it was no longer heavy. Something sacred had entered the silence. Something alive. And though Gideon could not yet see it, faith had already taken its first breath inside his trembling heart. Take another slow breath. Let it move through you like light across still water. Exhale softly. Let go of what you think you must be. Let God's gentleness remind you that your weakness is not your disqualification. It is your invitation. For this is where strength begins. Not in the might of our hands, but in the mercy of His presence. In the whisper that says, I am with you. Even here. Even now. The night lingered around the edges of the valley, quiet as a held breath. Gideon's heart still beat fast in the hollow of his chest, the angel's words echoing through him like ripples on still water. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. He looked around as if the voice might have been for someone else. But the fields were empty, the hills silent. Only the wind answered, brushing through the barley, whispering over the rough stone of the winepress. He felt small, unprepared, unseen by everyone except the one who had found him hiding here. He whispered to the dark, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened? Where are His wonders? Where is His help? The words fell heavy, not defiant, only tired, the sound of a soul too worn to pretend. And yet the angel did not leave. He simply looked at Gideon, calm as moonlight on water. Go in the strength you have, for I am sending you. The words seemed impossible. Go in the strength you have. But what strength did he have? His hands were calloused from survival, not battle. His heart was full of fear, not courage. And still, the voice had not chosen wrong, because heaven never chooses the strong. It strengthens the chosen. Gideon's breath trembled. He bowed his head, and the world around him seemed to hush. Even the wind paused to listen. Take a slow breath. In through the nose. Calm and deep. Exhale through the mouth. Gentle and long. Let your thoughts slow to the rhythm of this night. Let your fears loosen their hold, like knots untangling in the dark. He gathered his courage like a fragile flame cupped in shaking hands. Please, he whispered, give me a sign that you are truly with me. And though no thunder answered, a peace began to bloom within him, a warmth beneath the ribs, as though something unseen had said, you are heard. He went and brought an offering, bread and meat and broth, humble gifts carried in trembling hands. And the angel said, "Place them on the rock." Gideon did as he was told, heart pounding like a drum of rain. The angel reached out the staff in his hand, touched the rock, and fire burst from the stone. Not wild, not consuming, but pure, holy, alive. The light climbed upward in silence, a flame of glory without smoke, a sign that God had indeed heard. Gideon fell back, eyes wide, breath stolen by wonder. He covered his face, for now he knew. This was no dream, no wandering thought. This was the living God answering from the stillness. The flame faded, but the warmth remained. The stone now cool again, but marked forever, as was Gideon's heart. He sat there in the hush that followed, the smell of smoke gone, replaced by something softer. Peace, purpose, the awareness that he had been seen in his hiding, chosen in his weakness, called by name. And though fear still lingered like mist on the field, beneath it ran a deeper current. Faith, faint but real, enough for the next step, enough for the night. Take another slow breath. Let it settle your chest. Slow your pulse. Steady your mind. Exhale softly. Let go of what feels too heavy to carry alone. For the God who called Gideon from hiding still calls you, still finds you, still whispers courage into fearful hearts. And his strength begins right where yours ends. The night gave way to a pale dawn, light spilling softly over the valley like a gentle promise. The fire that had risen from the stone was gone now, but its memory lingered, a quiet warmth that lived beneath Gideon's ribs. He sat near the rock, eyes wide with the wonder of what had happened, heart full of questions too heavy to name. The world looked the same, yet nothing was the same. Every breath carried the echo of a holy call. Go in the strength you have. I am sending you. The words repeated in rhythm with his heartbeat, both comforting and terrifying. How could someone like him do anything great? How could trembling hands lead anyone to freedom? He looked toward the horizon where the Midianite camps waited, tents scattered like thorns across the plain, their fires still burning from the night. He thought of his people, hungry, afraid, of his father's house filled with idols, of his own fear that had kept him silent for so long, and he felt the weight of his inadequacy rise again. He spoke into the still morning. My Lord, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. His voice cracked like dry earth, a confession pulled from the depths of his weariness. But the answer came not in thunder, not in grandeur, only in stillness. I will be with you. 4 simple words. Yet they wrapped around his heart like shelter. They were not a promise of ease, but of presence. The kind of strength that walks beside weakness rather than replacing it. Gideon closed his eyes and let those words breathe inside him. Slowly, gently, until his fear and faith began to share the same space. Neither cancelling the other, but coexisting like night and dawn. Take a slow, deep breath. Let the air fill your lungs. Let it soften your chest. Exhale quietly. Let each doubt fall away like dust in wind. Feel the peace of being seen, known, chosen, even while afraid. He rose then, shoulders still tense but heart steadier. He walked through his father's courtyard, past the altar built to Baal, its stones blackened by years of false devotion. The sight stung, for this was the world he had grown within, the world God was asking him to change. That night, as the sky deepened and stars spilled over the hills, the Lord spoke to Gideon again. Not with fire this time, but with quiet clarity. Tear down the altar of Baal, and build one for me in its place. The command struck through him, fear flaring again. The people of his village would be furious. They might even seek his life. But something within him had changed. The warmth of the fire still pulsed inside his chest. He could not unhear the call, could not unknow the truth that had found him in hiding. So he gathered 10 servants, their steps hushed, their faces pale in the starlight. Together they moved through the sleeping village, tools in hand, hearts pounding like drums of thunder muffled beneath cloaks. And beneath the fig trees they began to tear down the altar, stone by stone, breath by trembling breath. Each stone that fell echoed through the night, the sound both terrifying and freeing. And when it was done, Gideon built a new altar, one of uncut stones, untouched by idols, and upon it he laid an offering to the true God. He named that place "The Lord is Peace," because even in his fear, even in the risk of obedience, peace had come, not from safety, but from surrender. The stars above flickered like candles. The wind carried the faint smell of crushed stone and new beginnings. And for the first time, Gideon's heart rested not in his own ability, but in the strength of the one who had called him. Take another slow breath. Let the story rest gently in you. Let the thought settle. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to trust love more than fear. Let your shoulders release. Your eyes grow soft. Your spirit still. For when God calls, He does not look for the mighty. He makes mighty those who answer. The dawn rose pale and cool over the valley, a thin mist curling through the fields where the altar once stood. The scent of ash and fresh earth still hung in the air, a quiet symbol of something both destroyed and reborn. Gideon stood at the edge of it all, his breath steady, his hands still trembling, but not from fear anymore, from awe. The altar of Baal lay scattered in broken pieces, and beside it, the new altar gleamed faintly in the morning light. Rough stones stacked by uncertain hands, yet holy now, consecrated not by perfection, but by obedience. When the villagers awoke, shouts filled the air, feet ran through the dust, eyes wide with fury and confusion. "Who has done this?" they cried. And when word spread that it was Gideon, son of Joash, a chill moved through the crowd like a blade of wind. But before they could act, Gideon's father stepped forward, his face calm and resolute. "If Baal is a god, let him contend for himself." The words fell like thunder over the murmuring crowd, silencing their rage, scattering their fear. And Gideon realized then that courage, like fire, spreads when one dares to strike the first spark. The morning sun climbed higher, the shadows pulling back into the hills. And though Gideon felt the weight of what had begun, beneath it was a deep stillness, peace where panic had once lived. That night, the Lord spoke again, the voice arriving as gently as breath. "You have torn down what was false. Now rise to defend what is true." And so the call deepened, beyond his village, beyond his fear, into the heart of a nation that had forgotten its strength. Gideon stood at the edge of the field, watching the horizon darken with the movement of the Midianite armies. Their tents spread across the valley floor like shadows devouring the earth, countless torches flickering in the night. The sight made his stomach tighten, his faith tremble, but not break. He whispered into the wind, "Lord, if you truly mean to save Israel through me, show me again that you are with me." And then he laid a fleece of wool upon the threshing floor. "If the dew is only on the fleece in the morning, and the ground is dry, then I will know." The night passed slow, full of restless prayer, and when morning came, he reached for the fleece. It was soaked, heavy with water, while the ground around it lay dry as dust. His heart leapt, faith rising. But still, the trembling returned, and he whispered again, "Lord, do not be angry. Let me test once more. This time, let the fleece be dry, and the ground wet with dew." The night returned, quiet and thick with stars. And when dawn broke again, he reached for the fleece. It was dry, and the ground around it shimmered with dew, sparkling like 1,000 small promises under the light of the rising sun. Gideon fell to his knees, breath catching in gratitude. He no longer asked if God was with him. Now he asked for the strength to follow wherever that presence led. Take a slow breath now. Let the air fill your chest with calm. Exhale softly. Let tension flow out of your shoulders. Let your mind rest in the rhythm of trust. Not certainty, but quiet surrender. Faith is not the absence of questions. It is the courage to keep listening after the answer comes. And sometimes, the signs we seek are not for proof, but for peace. Reminders that we are still seen, still guided, still chosen, even when afraid. The night lay still over the hills, the stars deep and clear, the kind of stillness that feels like it's waiting for something holy to begin. Gideon stood outside his tent, the fleece test behind him, the signs given, the call confirmed. Yet still his heart beat unevenly, like footsteps hesitating between fear and faith. The Lord had spoken again, softly, directly. Gather the men. I will deliver the Midianites into your hand. Gideon lifted his eyes toward the horizon. Faint fires flickered in the valley below. The enemy countless, their camp sprawling like a dark sea beneath the moon. He swallowed hard, the weight of the command pressing heavy on his chest. Gather the men. The words sounded so simple, and yet they carried an impossible task. He moved quietly through the sleeping camp of Israel, calling one by one. Farmers, shepherds, weary men who had lived too long under oppression, men with calloused hands and uncertain hearts. And they came. 3,000, then 10,000, until 32,000 stood under the dim sky, the sound of armor and breath mingling with the night wind. And as Gideon looked upon them, for a moment, courage flickered, strength seemed possible. But then, the voice came again, gentle, unwavering. You have too many men. For if you win with this number, Israel will think she saved herself. Not by my hand. The words fell like rain upon his growing confidence. Humbling, holy, disarming. Too many, he repeated under his breath. And God said, tell those who are afraid to go home. So he did, his voice carrying across the field like a tremor. If you are fearful, if your heart is heavy, you may return to your families. And he watched as 22,000 men turned back, their footsteps soft in the dust, leaving only 10,000 behind. The silence that followed felt vast, yet beneath it there was peace. A strange, steady peace. For even as numbers fell, trust began to rise. Take a slow deep breath. In through the nose. Calm and deep. Exhale softly. Let the air leave like a sigh of surrender. Let your heart find rest in the rhythm of letting go. Then the Lord spoke again. There are still too many. Lead them to the water, and I will test them there. Gideon obeyed, leading the remaining men down to the stream. The sound of running water filling the dawn air. Cool mist touching their faces. He watched as the men knelt to drink. Some plunged their faces into the stream. Desperate. Careless. Others cupped the water gently in their hands, bringing it slowly to their mouths. Eyes still lifted. Watchful. Ready. And the Lord said, "Separate those who lap the water with their hands from those who kneel to drink." When it was done, only 300 remained. 300 men who drank watchfully, steady, present, aware. The rest were sent home. And Gideon stood alone with his 300. The murmuring of the dismissed fading into the valley. The morning light breaking over their faces. 300. Against thousands upon thousands. And still, the voice came again. "With these, I will save you." Gideon's knees weakened, tears stinging his eyes. He fell to the ground, whispering into the dust, "Then let it be your strength, not mine, your hand, not ours, your glory, not my name." The wind moved through the trees, gentle and sure, like the breath of God over the trembling earth. Take another deep breath. Let the truth of surrender fill your chest. Exhale, and feel the calm that comes when control finally releases. Let peace settle where fear once sat. For faith often begins when our plans end. When all that remains is trust, and the quiet assurance that the few, in God's hands, are already enough. The night was deep and cool, a soft wind breathing through the valley. Stars scattered wide across the heavens like lamps hung by unseen hands. And there, in the quiet between one heartbeat and the next, Gideon stood before the small company of men God had chosen. 300 souls against an army that filled the plains like the tide of a dark sea. Their campfires flickered faintly around him. Faces dimly lit. Quiet. Waiting. Some sharpening blades. Others whispering prayers. The sound of armor and breathing mingling with the rustle of wind through the trees. Yet beneath it all, there was peace. Fragile. Trembling. But real. Gideon's thoughts moved slow. Steady. Like a man walking the edge of a dream. 300. He murmured. And you have called this enough. He lifted his gaze to the stars. To the same sky that had heard the promise to Abraham. To the same light that had guided Moses. And he breathed out a long, quiet sigh. If you will go with us, then even this will be enough. He walked among the men, laying a hand on each shoulder as he passed, not with speeches or shouts, but with calm presence, the kind of courage that is born not from strength, but from stillness. Each man feeling the quiet weight of purpose settle upon him. Take a slow breath. In through the nose. Unhurried. Exhale through the mouth. Gentle and long. Let your body loosen. Your heart quiet. Your thoughts rest like dust on still water. At the edge of the camp, Gideon paused beside the stream. The same water where they had been tested. He knelt, dipped his hand into the cool current, and let it flow through his fingers. He thought of all who had gone home, of all that had been stripped away, until only trust remained. And he whispered, "Lord, make me small enough for you to be great." A peace came then, deep and certain, not the kind that silences fear, but the kind that stands firm in its midst. Faith wrapped in surrender, strength born from yielding. The Lord spoke again, not in thunder, but in thought. "Arise, go down to the camp of the Midianites, for I have delivered them into your hand. But if you are afraid, take your servant and go listen to what they say." Gideon rose, heart pounding, the night stretching endless before him. And yet, the promise of victory shimmered in the stillness like light beneath the surface of dark water. He turned back to the men. "Rest," he said softly, "for the Lord will act before the dawn." The camp settled. The sound of quiet breathing mingled with the hum of insects and the sigh of the wind. Gideon and his servant began to walk down the slope, toward the sea of tents below, shadows moving between moonlight and mist, the ground cool beneath their feet. Every step felt like a prayer. "God, make me brave enough to trust you, even here, even now." The valley spread wide before them, filled with the sound of distant horses, clinking metal, murmured voices, an army vast as sand. Yet in that immensity, Gideon felt something holy, the strange peace that only comes when a soul stops fighting its fear and finally believes. He looked toward the horizon where night met dawn, a faint glow just beginning to rise. And for the first time since the angel found him in the winepress, Gideon smiled, not because he was strong, but because he no longer needed to be. Take another slow breath. Let it move through you like the hush before morning. Exhale gently. Let the body soften, the heart steady. Let faith settle deeper than fear. Let trust become the rhythm of your rest. For God's power begins where human strength ends, and in the trembling hands of the willing, miracles are born. The valley slept under a wide and watchful moon, silver lights spilling across the sea of tents below, each one flickering faintly with the glow of small fires. The sound of horses shifting, men breathing, the quiet hum of an army that believed itself invincible. Gideon stood on the ridge above it, his breath shallow, his heart thudding softly against his chest. The air carried the scent of dust and smoke, and beneath it, something else, a stillness that did not belong to fear, but to purpose. He had come with his servant as the Lord instructed, stepping carefully down the slope, the night thick and soft around them, each step a whisper of obedience. They moved between shadows, quiet as wind over stone, until voices reached them, faint at first, then clearer. Two Midianite soldiers speaking by the edge of their campfire. The first man said, "I had a dream. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into our camp. It struck the tent with such force that it overturned and collapsed." The other answered, his tone low and uneasy, "That can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." Gideon froze, the words settling over him like dew. The dream, the interpretation, all of it flowing together like rivers meeting at last. The sign he hadn't known he was waiting for. The final confirmation whispered not from heaven this time, but from the lips of his enemies. He fell to his knees, the earth cool beneath his hands, tears gathering in his eyes, not of fear, but of awe. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for speaking even through those who do not know you. Thank you for showing me that this battle was never mine to fight." He bowed his head low, worship rising in his chest like flame, the sound of the enemy camp fading into the stillness of his surrender. In that moment he knew God had already gone before him. Take a slow breath now, in through the nose, calm and steady. Exhale softly. Let the thought of divine timing settle into your bones. Let your pulse slow, your shoulders release, your heart remember that peace and power can live together. When he returned to his camp, his face carried the light of understanding, the quiet fire of faith that needs no proof. "Rise," he told his men softly, "for the Lord has delivered the Midianite camp into our hands." The men stirred, eyes still heavy with sleep. But as they looked upon their leader, they saw something that calmed them. The fear that had once filled him was gone, replaced by a still confidence. Gentle, but immovable. Gideon divided the 300 into 3 companies, placing in every hand not a sword, but a trumpet, and an empty jar with a torch hidden inside. No armor, no chariots, no might but faith. The night watched as they spread out along the ridges, silent shadows beneath the stars. He looked at each group, faces dimly visible in the torchlight, and spoke softly. "When you hear my trumpet, blow yours, break the jars, and shout with one voice, 'The sword of the Lord and of Gideon.'" It sounded foolish by every measure of men, but faith often looks like foolishness before it becomes victory. Gideon took his place, the jar in one hand, the trumpet in the other, the valley below still restless in sleep. the army of Midian, unknowing that the hand of heaven hovered above them. The air held its breath, every heartbeat waiting for the moment when trust would turn to action, when silence would shatter into glory. Take another slow breath. Let the stillness of this moment fill you. Exhale gently. Feel the calm before courage. Let peace and power rest together inside you like flame waiting to be revealed. For the greatest strength comes not from numbers, but from trust. Not from weapons, but from obedience. Not from the noise of might, but from the quiet certainty that God is already there. The moon hung high above the valley, pale and watchful, the world holding its breath. The camp of Midian spread below like a sea of restless shadows, torches flickering in faint waves of gold. The sound of distant murmurs rolling through the cool air like a low tide. Gideon stood on the ridge, his hand steady on the trumpet, the clay jar cool and fragile beneath his fingers. 300 men waited with him, spread out across the dark hills, each one silent, each one holding light that was still hidden, a flame sleeping inside clay, waiting for the moment it would be seen. Gideon looked once toward the sky, the stars bright as promises that cannot be broken. Now, Lord, let your strength be seen, not mine, not theirs, only yours. And as the words left his heart, a still command rose within him. Quiet, certain, it is time. He raised the trumpet to his lips, and the first sound pierced the night. Sharp, bright, holy. It split the silence like lightning through dark clouds, echoing across the valley. One note of faith strong enough to wake the world. Then another trumpet, and another, the sound growing like a tide of wind rushing through the hills. And all at once, the jars shattered, breaking open the hidden light. 300 flames bursting into the darkness at once, dancing in the night like a sky fallen to earth. The shouts followed, strong and sure, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. The cry rolled down the slopes and filled the valley like thunder, startling the earth awake. The enemy camp erupted in chaos. Men leapt from their tents, eyes wide with confusion, swords drawn against shadows, against one another. Panic swept through the sea of tents like wildfire through dry grass. Gideon's men did not descend with swords. They only stood, holding their torches high, trumpets sounding, light blazing where once there was only fear. And in that divine confusion, the battle was won, not by might, not by numbers, but by obedience, by the sound of faith breaking the silence. Gideon watched from the ridge, his breath caught between awe and disbelief. So this is how you fight, he whispered. He remembered the words once spoken to him beneath the oak. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. And now he understood. The warrior's strength was never in his hands. It had always been in the God who filled them. The valley below shimmered with chaos and light. Yet above it, there was peace. The stars unmoving, the moon serene. Heaven watching its own power unfold through fragile men. Take a slow breath. In through the nose. Steady and deep. Exhale softly. Release every thought of what strength must look like. Let your heart rest in the truth that God's power often comes quietly, through cracked vessels and trembling voices. As the last jars shattered and the last trumpet call faded, the sound that followed was not of war, but of wonder. The enemy fleeing into the shadows. The hills echoing with the song of victory given, not earned. The men looked to Gideon, faces lit by the glow of their torches, hearts stunned by what they had seen. He nodded once, eyes shining in the flicker of holy fire. It was never us. He whispered. It was always him. The wind moved through the valley, sweeping away the last echoes of battle, replacing them with peace. The kind of peace that comes when human strength finally bows to divine power. Take another slow breath. Let it fill your chest with gratitude. Exhale. Let the soul rest. Let the spirit quiet. Let the story remind you that light shines brightest when the jar is broken, and that God's glory is revealed most fully through those who trust Him completely. The night quivered with echoes, the sound of trumpets fading into the distance, the light of shattered jars flickering low against the rocks. And below in the valley, the vast camp of Midian had dissolved into chaos. Torches overturned, tents collapsing, voices crying out in confusion and fear. Gideon stood upon the ridge, his breath slow, his hands trembling around the trumpet that had just sounded the call of heaven. His eyes wide with awe as he watched the miracle unfold. The enemy scattered before him like leaves caught in a wind they could not see. Men stumbled over one another in panic. The clash of swords rose and fell in a rhythm of terror. They fought in the darkness, not knowing who was friend or foe. The hand of the Lord had moved through their ranks like a storm through tall grass. Silent at first, then unstoppable. The 300 stood still, torches raised high. No chase, no roar of triumph. Only quiet obedience. Waiting. Watching as the power that was not theirs finished the battle they could never have fought alone. When the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, Gideon's men lowered their trumpets. The sound of panic fading into the distance. The hills settling into stillness once again. It was over. Victory had come without a single sword drawn in rage. Only the breaking of jars. Only the shining of light. Only the sound of trust. Gideon sank to his knees, dust rising softly around him, tears slipping down his face. You did it, Lord. You did what no man could do." The words trembled like worship too full for breath. The men around him followed suit, bowing their heads, not in exhaustion, but in reverence, for they knew they had witnessed something sacred, the strength of heaven revealed through the smallest of hearts. Take a slow, deep breath. Inhale calm. Exhale wonder. Let the thought settle that peace can come through surrender. That victory belongs not to might, but to mercy. As the morning brightened, Gideon rose once more, his eyes tracing the trail of the fleeing Midianites, smoke rising faintly from their abandoned fires. He turned to his men. "Now, follow them, for the Lord has delivered them into our hands." And though their bodies were weary, their spirits surged with purpose. They gathered what little they had, and began to move, not in arrogance, but in awe, each step light, steady, their torches still glowing in the daylight like memories of faith. They descended into the valley, where silence now reigned, tents torn and empty, swords scattered like forgotten fears, and amid it all, a strange stillness, not the quiet of defeat, but the quiet of completion, as if even the earth itself was resting from the hand of God that had passed through it. Gideon walked among the remnants, his fingers brushing the fabric of fallen tents, the ashes of burnt fires, the echo of what once was a threat now turned into proof. Proof that God keeps his promises, even when we do not understand how. The men gathered behind him, waiting for what came next. He looked back at them, the same farmers and shepherds who had once trembled at the sound of the enemy, now standing tall in the soft light of morning, their faces calm, their eyes steady. They had seen what faith could do, and it had changed them forever. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke and victory, a reminder that what had been feared had now become testimony. And in that gentle air, Gideon closed his eyes and whispered, "It is not our strength, but yours alone, forever yours." Take another breath, slow and deep. Let gratitude fill your lungs. Exhale softly. Let peace spread through the body. Let the spirit rest in the truth that battles end not when enemies fall, but when faith stands unbroken. For even in the quiet after victory, the true triumph remains the same. Hearts surrendered, light shining, God's power made perfect in human weakness. The sun lifted slowly above the horizon, gold spilling over the quiet hills. The valley washed clean by light. The chaos of the night now only a memory whispered by the wind. Gideon stood among the remnants of the enemy's camp, the ashes cooling, the tents half fallen, silence resting heavy where once there had been the roar of war. The air carried the scent of dust and smoke, but also something softer, renewal. A strange stillness filled the space between heartbeats. The kind that follows when heaven has done what human hands could not. Gideon turned toward the hills where the Midianites fled, the line of their retreat winding faintly through the dawn mist. And in that hush, his thoughts drifted back to the dream he had overheard in the night. The barley loaf tumbling through the camp. Small, unexpected, yet strong enough to overturn tents. He smiled faintly now, understanding what it meant. I was the barley loaf, he thought. Small, common, nothing special, yet chosen to carry God's strength. The image filled him with quiet awe, a reminder that God's power had never rested in might, but in humility, in simple faith that moves even when trembling. The men gathered around him, their faces tired but shining, the fear that once bound them replaced by calm certainty. They looked to Gideon for what came next. But before he spoke, he knelt, hands pressed to the cool earth, his voice low. Lord, let my heart never forget that this victory was yours, not mine. He rose slowly, brushing dust from his knees, his gaze steady. We will pursue them, he said softly, but not for vengeance, for completion, for peace, for the end of what began this night. The men nodded, and together they began to move, their steps slow at first, the morning light guiding them through the valley, the broken remnants of battle crunching beneath their feet, their shadows long and quiet behind them. Take a slow breath, in through the nose, calm and deep. Exhale softly. Let the thought of divine strength settle over you like morning light. Let peace rest in the places where you once tried to carry everything alone. As they moved, Gideon looked again at the world around him. The quiet beauty that followed chaos. The way sunlight touched every scarred stone, every trampled path, turning ruin into radiance. He realized that the victory had not simply changed the land. It had changed them. These men were no longer the frightened souls who once hid from the enemy. They were witnesses of God's power, participants in his faithfulness, bearers of a story that would outlive their names. At the edge of the valley, they paused, turning once more toward what had been. The hills behind them golden in the growing day. The air full of peace, of promise, of gratitude. Gideon felt it like a steady heartbeat inside his chest. The Lord is peace, he whispered, repeating the name he had given the altar so long ago. And it felt even truer now. He lifted his eyes to the horizon, where the last traces of shadow fled before the rising sun. And his voice came again, softer this time. It was never about strength. It was always about surrender. The wind stirred through the valley, wrapping around him like an embrace, carrying the scent of dew and earth. The sound of doves rising in the distance, The whole world seemed to breathe the same word back to him. Surrender. Take another slow breath. Let it move gently through the chest. Exhale, releasing every need to understand or control. Let the quiet of this story wash through you like sunlight through leaves. For the truest power is not found in force, but in faith. Not in the loudness of victory, but in the calm that follows. When the soul remembers that God's strength was enough all along. The morning grew brighter, the light pouring like gold across the hills and stones. The earth warm beneath the feet of Gideon's 300, their shadows stretching long behind them as they followed the path of the fleeing enemy. Each step quiet, steady, certain, their weapons light, their faith heavy with what they had just seen. The valley ahead was wide and open, the air filled with the scent of dust and wind. In the distance, the Midianite army scattered in waves of confusion, cries rising faintly through the still air. But there was no strength in those cries now. Only fear. Only the echo of what once believed itself unconquerable. Gideon's heart beat calmly within him. The same heart that once hid in fear beneath the winepress now walked unshaken through the valley. Not because he had become mighty, but because he had finally understood that God's strength had always been enough. That victory was only ever a reflection of trust. He lifted his hand, signaling the men to stop. They gathered around him in silence, faces dusted with the earth of the battle, eyes lifted toward the horizon where the last of the enemy faded into shadow. He looked upon them, farmers, shepherds, fathers, ordinary men who had done an extraordinary thing simply because they believed. And his heart swelled with gratitude. Not pride, not triumph, only gratitude. He spoke softly, his voice carrying in the morning air. Do not forget this day. Do not forget that it was not the sword that saved us, nor our number, but the hand of the Lord that moved among us. The men nodded, the sound of their armor shifting softly like the sigh of trees in wind. They did not shout. They did not raise their hands. They simply stood, still and reverent, as the truth of his words sank deep into their souls. Take a slow breath. Let the air move easily through you. Exhale softly. Let the memory of this peace rest over your heart. Let the spirit grow quiet in the awareness that divine power needs no noise to prove itself. As the sun climbed higher, its light reached the edges of the valley where the shattered jars still lay among the rocks, fragments of clay glimmering faintly in the new light. Gideon walked toward them, stooping to pick up one small piece, smooth on one side, jagged on the other. He turned it in his hand and smiled. He saw in that broken fragment the reflection of his own heart, cracked, imperfect, yet through the breaking, light had been revealed. He whispered to himself, "It is the breaking that lets the glory through." He held the fragment for a moment longer, then set it back upon the ground, letting it rest where it had fallen, letting the earth reclaim what had already fulfilled its purpose. A gentle wind moved through the valley then, warm, clean, wrapping around the men like a quiet benediction. A final whisper from heaven saying, "It is finished. Rest now. Peace belongs to you." The men turned their faces toward home, toward the hills where their families waited, toward the fields that would once again grow grain in safety. Each man carrying in his chest not the pride of warriors, but the peace of witnesses, those who had seen the power of trust made real. Take another slow breath. Inhale the calm, the quiet strength that faith brings. Exhale the last remnants of striving, of needing to prove. Let your soul rest in the truth that what is broken can still shine, and what is small can still change the world when it rests in God's hands. For Gideon's battle was never about the sword. It was about surrender, and the light that shines brightest when we finally stop trying to win alone. The afternoon light mellowed into gold, the air soft and slow over the quiet land. The 300 moved through the valley with the rhythm of peace returning, their torches now only smoldering sticks, their trumpets slung over their shoulders, their steps light, unhurried, each man walking in a silence filled with wonder. The world around them had changed, and yet it was not the land that felt new. It was them. Hearts once heavy with fear now hollowed out and filled with calm. The kind that lingers when a soul has seen what only faith can do. Gideon walked ahead, the hem of his cloak brushing the ground, his eyes tracing the horizon where the last of the Midianites had vanished. The earth ahead quiet, the wind carrying no sound of pursuit, just the low hum of insects and the soft sigh of grain swaying in the distance. He remembered the moment of breaking, the trumpets, the light, the roar of confusion, and how none of it had come from his own plan. None of it from strategy or skill. It had all been gift. Every heartbeat, every breath of courage, every tremble turned to trust. All gift. He stopped for a moment and turned, looking at the men who followed him. Faces lined by dust, eyes lit by the peace of fulfillment. And he realized, they no longer looked like the fearful men he had first called. They looked like those who had walked through miracle and come out believing. He said softly, "The Lord has done this. Not us. Not our hands. His. And to him belongs all praise." The men nodded, a murmur of agreement moving through them like a warm breeze. Their hearts lifted in quiet gratitude, and in that hush of reverence, Gideon felt something deep stir within him. Not pride, not relief, but gratitude so pure it was almost too heavy to hold. Take a slow breath, in through the nose, calm and deep. Exhale softly, Let your thoughts grow still. Let your body rest in the memory of this peace. The peace that comes when you stop striving and simply trust. As the evening drew near, they reached the river, the same stream where the men had been tested, where the chosen few had lifted water to their lips with watchful eyes. Gideon knelt at its edge, cupped his hands, and drank slowly. The water cool, clear, alive. He watched it slip between his fingers, and whispered, "You have tested me, Lord, and found me small. Yet still you poured your strength into my weakness. Still you chose to work through what the world would overlook." The water rippled softly, catching the reflection of the lowering sun, shimmering like gold in his hands. He smiled faintly, because he understood now. That faith was not the absence of fear. It was the willingness to act while still trembling, trusting that God's steadiness could hold his shaking. Behind him, the men knelt too, filling their hands, lifting the water to their lips, drinking quietly, together, as if they were partaking in something sacred. When they rose, the valley glowed in the last light of day, shadows long and peaceful, the scent of grain and earth filling the air. Gideon looked once more at the horizon and whispered, "Peace to this land, peace to this people, peace to every heart that learns to trust the strength that is not their own." The wind seemed to answer, moving gently through the grass, carrying his prayer through the fading light. Take another slow breath. Let it move through you like water down a stream. Exhale softly, letting every burden drift away. Let your heart rest in the same peace that held Gideon when fear was gone and faith remained. For strength is not found in what we conquer, but in whom we trust. And the greatest victories are those that leave the world quiet again, wrapped in the gentleness of God's power. The sun sank low beyond the hills, its last light stretching across the valley like a soft golden veil. Shadows lengthened. The wind grew cooler. The quiet deepened until even the air felt reverent. Gideon and his men stood at the river's edge, the water glimmering in the dimming glow, a mirror to the peace that had finally settled inside them. They had walked through fear, through doubt, through battle, and now they stood in the calm that only follows surrender, their hearts no longer racing with adrenaline, but moving in the slower, steadier rhythm of faith fulfilled. Gideon knelt beside the stream, the hem of his cloak darkening as it touched the water. He cupped his hands again, watching the current swirl between his fingers, and his thoughts drifted back to every moment that had brought him here. The angel beneath the oak tree, the trembling voice of his own doubt, the altar of peace, the fleece soaked with dew, the night of broken jars and shining light. Each memory was a step, each fear a place where trust had taken root, and together they had built this moment, this stillness where all striving ceased. He whispered softly, "You have shown me, Lord, that your power does not roar. It whispers. That your strength does not demand. It invites. That victory does not belong to the loud or the many, but to the faithful who are willing to be small." The men nearby began to settle along the banks, resting against smooth stones, the murmur of their breathing mingling with the gentle sound of flowing water. One by one they closed their eyes, their armor set aside, their hands open in the quiet posture of peace. The world around them glowed with the faint silver of oncoming dusk. A few birds called softly from the trees. Somewhere far off, a stream trickled into another, the sound like a lullaby of the land returning to rest. Take a slow breath. Inhale the calm of this evening scene. Exhale softly. Let your shoulders drop. Let the breath of stillness move through you. Let the same peace that held Gideon rest now in your chest. As darkness deepened, Gideon lifted his eyes to the sky. Stars beginning to pierce through the last light. One. Then another. Until the heavens shimmered like a promise too vast for words. He remembered the voice that had once called him mighty warrior, and smiled quietly. For now he understood that the words had never been about his strength, but about the strength that flowed through him when he trusted the one who called. He turned to look at the men around him, faces soft in the glow of moonlight, eyes closed in prayer or sleep, their hearts unguarded, safe. He thought of their families waiting beyond the hills, the children who would wake to peace, the fields that would grow again, the songs that would return to the evening air. The thought filled him with warmth, the kind that feels like worship even without words. He whispered once more, "You have made peace from fear, beauty from trembling, victory from weakness. And I will remember. I will remember that all I am came from your hand." The night answered with silence, but it was the holy kind, full of presence, full of knowing. Take another slow breath. Let it enter softly, like starlight into open water. Exhale. Feel the weight of the day fall away. Let the mind quiet, the spirit ease. Let gratitude fill the space where fear once lived. For this is what faith becomes at the end of battle. Not noise, not triumph, but rest. The peace that comes from knowing the fight was never ours, and that in every trembling moment, God's strength was enough. The night stretched deep and wide across the valley, the stars calm above the sleeping land, the river whispering softly at its edge. Gideon sat awake while his men rested, his hands folded loosely over his knees, his eyes tracing the constellations that had guided so many before him. Abraham, Moses, now him, all drawn into stories too big for their own strength, yet held perfectly within the strength of God. The cool air wrapped around him, carrying the faint scent of smoke and earth. a gentle reminder of what had been overcome, of what had begun anew. And as he breathed it in, his thoughts settled like dust after a long wind. He thought of the battle, of the light bursting from broken jars, of the sound of trumpets echoing through the darkness, of fear turning into faith right before his eyes. And he knew he would never forget that moment when heaven moved through their trembling hands. The stream murmured beside him, a soft and constant voice, and Gideon spoke quietly into its rhythm. "You have shown me, Lord, that your power is not loud. It is steady. That your miracles do not need crowds, only hearts that trust. You take what is small and make it enough. You take what is trembling and make it brave." The water shimmered under the moonlight as if it were listening, and in that stillness, Gideon felt the familiar warmth again, the same peace that had met him at the winepress, at the altar, at the fleece. It was always the same presence, the same patience, the same love that did not rush, only remained. He looked toward his men, scattered in small groups along the riverbank, sleeping with open hands and quiet faces. And he smiled. They had learned the same truth, that victory was never about conquering others, but about finding peace within the heart that trusts its maker. Take a slow breath now, in through the nose, calm and steady. Exhale softly. Let the body loosen. Let the mind grow still. Let every sound fade into quiet except the whisper of peace that moves through the spirit like water through reeds. The wind shifted slightly, cool and light, carrying with it the faintest scent of cedar from the hills. Gideon tilted his head toward it and closed his eyes, letting the air move through his hair, through the space around him, like a benediction, a blessing without words. He thought of the people who had feared, the children who would now sleep in safety, the fields that would bloom again, and tears filled his eyes, quiet tears of gratitude. For this was what faithfulness had been for. Not glory, not fame, but restoration. Life returning to the ordinary in the grace of God's peace. The moon climbed higher, soft and full, lighting the path of the stream as it wound its way toward distant fields. Gideon watched it glimmer like liquid silver, and in that glow, he saw the reflection of everything this journey had taught him. That surrender is not defeat. It is worship. That silence is not emptiness. It is presence. And that peace is not the end of the battle. It is the beginning of all things made new. He lifted his hand and let the cool water run over his palm, whispering softly, "Be still, and know that you are God." The words hung in the air like a prayer, like a breath carried upward to where the stars listen. Take another slow breath. Inhale the hush of night, the calm of completion. Exhale the last remnants of striving. the echoes of fear. Let the peace that filled Gideon's heart fill yours too. Steady, gentle, real. For when the noise of battle is gone, and the light of victory fades, what remains is the stillness where God dwells, the quiet power that was always there, waiting for us to notice. The first hint of dawn brushed the edge of the sky, soft grey turning slowly to rose, a hush of light spilling gently across the valley where Gideon and his men rested, the world awakening in peace for the first time in years. No shouts, no footsteps of fear, only the low murmur of wind through the trees, and the song of unseen birds greeting the morning. Gideon rose quietly, his cloak gathering the dew from the grass. The river still moved beside him, slow and silver, its voice steady, unchanged. He stood there for a long moment, simply listening, his heart full and still. He thought of all that had happened, of how fear had become faith, how weakness had become strength, not through his own hands, but through the one who had guided them. Every step, every breath, every trembling yes. Behind him, the men began to stir, stretching, murmuring softly to one another, smiles faint beneath tired eyes. There was no roar of victory, no celebration of conquest, only quiet reverence, the peace that follows when a miracle has done its work completely. They gathered around their leader, and Gideon looked upon them with a gentleness that was almost fatherly. "This is what the Lord desired," he said softly. "Not destruction, but peace. Not glory for men, but rest for his people." The men nodded, and one by one they knelt by the river to wash their hands and faces, the cool water running clear over their skin. The gesture simple, sacred, like a baptism after a long season of fear, a washing away of what had been heavy. Gideon knelt too, scooping water in his palms, watching it shimmer in the growing light. "You have given rest to the weary, strength to the faint-hearted, peace to the fearful," he whispered. "You have proven again that your power is not found in armies, but in hearts that trust." The sun crested the hills then, light spilling warm and gold over the land, touching the faces of the men, glinting off the water, turning every drop into something holy. Take a slow breath now. Inhale the warmth of that sunrise. Exhale softly, letting peace fill the space inside you. Let the quiet power of gratitude move through your chest like a tide coming home. Gideon looked at his reflection in the river. The same man, yet not the same. His eyes carried both the weight and the wonder of what faith had done. He smiled faintly, not in pride, but in humble amazement. He turned toward the hills where his village waited, where families would soon wake to light and laughter, where altars once built to fear would now be stones of remembrance. And he whispered, "May this peace stay. May it outlast us all." The men began to gather their things. Slow, unhurried, their movements gentle, each one pausing to look back toward the valley where light now lay like a blessing. They knew they would carry this day forever, not as a story of war, but as a song of trust. The air shimmered with warmth, with promise, with the quiet holiness that lingers when God has finished what he began. And in that glow, Gideon lifted his hand once more. "The Lord is peace," he said, and the words floated over the valley like incense, rising into the new day. Take another slow breath, in through the nose, calm and deep. Exhale, and let every remaining thought grow still. Let peace settle over your heart like sunlight over water. Let gratitude rest quietly where fear once lived. For true victory is not the moment when the battle ends, but the moment when peace begins. When the heart understands that every strength, every breath, every bit of courage was grace all along. The day unfolded slow and golden. The kind of day that feels like a deep breath after years of holding it in. The fields shimmered in the light. The trees whispered softly in the breeze. And the valley that had once echoed with fear now hummed with stillness. Peace laying over it like a gentle hand. Gideon and his men walked toward home, their sandals brushing against the tall grass, their shadows moving long across the earth. No one spoke loudly. There was no need. Their silence was full, thick with meaning, filled with the memory of what they had seen and what they had become. Birds traced quiet arcs above them, the sky wide and endless, and with every step, the land itself seemed to breathe easier, as if creation knew the weight of oppression had lifted, as if God himself had exhaled through the morning air. Gideon's mind wandered to the faces of his people, the ones who had hidden in caves and shadows, who had lived on fear more than bread, who had prayed for deliverance in whispers. Now they would see it. Now they would stand in open fields again, no longer afraid to lift their heads to the light. He smiled faintly, a quiet joy stirring in his chest. Not the sharp spark of victory, but the slow warmth of restoration. The peace that follows when the heart finally learns to rest in God's timing, in God's way. They came upon a hill overlooking the plains, and Gideon paused, turning to look back one last time. The valley stretched wide beneath him, golden and still, the river glinting like silver thread through the earth. And he whispered, "This is what it was all for. Not triumph, but peace. Not glory, but gratitude." The men stopped beside him, standing shoulder to shoulder, their eyes following his gaze. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The silence itself was worship. Take a slow, deep breath. Let the stillness of this morning fill your lungs. Exhale softly. Let every remaining tension leave with it. Let your mind settle into the calm rhythm of the wind over open fields. The thought came quietly to Gideon. The truth simple and deep. God never needed the strong. He needed the willing. He needed those who would trust him more than they trusted themselves. He closed his eyes, letting that truth rest within him, the same way it rested upon the land. Gentle, immovable, eternal. As they descended the hill, the sound of the village grew faintly in the distance. Laughter, the clatter of tools, voices lifted in song. The people had heard. They knew. Deliverance had come. Children ran to meet them. Faces bright. Eyes wide with joy. The men smiled, kneeling to greet them. Hands once made for battle now open and soft again. The world had shifted back into peace. Gideon felt a warmth spread through him that no victory could ever match. It was not the pride of success, but the quiet awe of seeing life restored, of knowing that God had taken what was broken and made it whole again. He whispered as he walked, "May this peace endure. May we remember what brought it. Not strength, but surrender. Not force, but faith." The wind seemed to agree, moving gently through the olive trees at the village edge, carrying his words like a prayer. Take another deep breath. Inhale the quiet rhythm of peace. Exhale slowly, letting your soul grow still. Let your heart remember that true strength is gentle, and that lasting peace is the fruit of trust. For every battle ends, but faith remains. And the heart that learns to rest in God's power will never again mistake stillness for weakness, or quiet for defeat. The sun had climbed high now, its warmth resting gently over the land. The village alive once more with movement and laughter. The scent of baking bread drifting through the air. The sound of animals in the fields. The hum of ordinary life returning after too many years of silence and fear. Gideon stood at the edge of it all, watching as people embraced, as children ran through the dust laughing, as elders lifted their eyes to heaven with trembling gratitude. It was a sight that filled him with quiet joy, yet also with something heavier. The weight that often follows peace. The awareness of responsibility. He had been called from hiding to lead. But now that the battle was over, the harder task began. Not to fight, but to remain faithful in the calm. To guard the peace God had given. To remember that victory fades quickly if the heart forgets who gave it. He walked through the narrow streets, people bowing slightly as he passed, their voices whispering blessings, their eyes full of respect. Yet every praise only deepened his humility, because each word reminded him that this honor was not his to claim. It belonged to the one who had called him when no one else would have. the one who had found him in fear and turned it into faith. He paused before the place where the old altar to Baal once stood, now replaced by a simple stone one, rough, unadorned, but holy. Upon it lay fresh grain and oil, offerings of gratitude from the people. He ran his hand along the stone's surface, cool under his fingertips, and whispered, "Let this remain, not as a monument to victory, but as a reminder of trust." The breeze shifted, carrying with it the scent of the fields, the sound of a woman singing softly in the distance. And Gideon closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the simplicity of peace. Take a slow breath, in through the nose, unhurried and deep. Exhale gently, letting each thought soften. Let your shoulders ease, your chest loosen, your spirit find stillness in the quiet strength that comes after surrender. He thought of the men who had walked beside him, of the ones who had gone home, of the few who had stayed, and how each one had played their part in the story of God's faithfulness. None forgotten, none unseen. The villagers approached with gifts, bread, wine, oil. They bowed low, saying, "Rule over us, Gideon, you and your sons after you, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian." The words struck him like a bell in the still air, soft, but heavy with temptation. He looked at them for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "No, the Lord shall rule over you, not I, not my sons. It was his hand, not mine, that saved us." The people fell silent, his answer settling over them like cool shade on a warm day. Humility standing where pride could have easily grown. And in that choice, Gideon won a quieter, deeper victory. The kind that heaven measures. The kind that keeps peace alive long after battles end. He turned his eyes to the hills beyond, and whispered softly, "Keep me small, Lord. Keep me faithful. Let my heart never forget that every breath of strength was borrowed from you." The wind stirred through the olive branches in answer, a sound like a sigh of approval from heaven. Take another slow breath. Let humility fill your lungs like clean air. Exhale the need for control or praise. Let gratitude take its place. Gentle, enduring, real. For faith does not end when the battle is won. It continues in the quiet choices that follow, in the humility that guards peace, in the remembrance that every triumph begins and ends in God's hands. Evening returned once more to the valley, the sky a soft blend of amber and violet, the air carrying the cool sweetness of ripening grain. Gideon sat beside the altar he had built. The stones warmed from the day's light, his hands resting upon his knees, his eyes watching the horizon as the sun slipped behind the hills. Peace still covered the land, but within his heart stirred a quiet unease. He knew how fragile peace could be, How quickly hearts forget. How easily the memory of fear fades once comfort returns. The people were joyful now, singing in the streets, rebuilding homes, planting crops. Yet in their laughter, he sensed the beginning of something familiar, a restlessness, a drift toward forgetting. He whispered into the breeze, "Lord, teach us to remember, to stay humble in plenty, to remain faithful in the calm, to see you not only in battle, but in every ordinary hour of peace." The wind brushed his face, cool and soft, as though in answer, but still he felt the weight of his concern. For he knew that the hardest battles are not always fought with swords. Sometimes they are fought in silence, in prosperity, in pride. He rose slowly and walked through the village, lamps flickering to life in windows, laughter spilling into the dusk, the air alive with comfort, with relief. And yet, something deep within him whispered caution, the quiet warning of a man who had seen how quickly faith can fade when life becomes easy. A child ran past him laughing, and Gideon smiled, the sound pure, full of light. He knelt for a moment and placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Remember the Lord, little one. Always remember. It was He who gave us this peace." The boy nodded, not fully understanding, but something in the man's voice made him still, made him listen. Take a slow breath. Inhale the stillness of this evening. Exhale softly, letting the air carry away the noise of the day. Let your mind rest in the balance between gratitude and awareness, where peace is born and kept alive. Later, as the stars began to appear, Gideon returned to his home, the sound of distant songs still rising through the air, his heart both grateful and heavy, for he knew human hearts often reach for comfort faster than they reach for faith. And he prayed silently, "Let them not forget, Lord. Let them not trade reverence for ease." The night deepened. The fire in his hearth burned low. His hands folded, his eyes on the glowing embers. "Help me remember too," he whispered. For even the faithful can forget when the world grows quiet. Outside, the wind shifted again, brushing through the trees with a sound like a sigh, or perhaps a reminder, a gentle voice saying, "Stay near, stay humble, stay small." Gideon bowed his head, his breath slow and even. "I will, Lord. I will stay small before you, for your power shines brightest when I am still." Take another slow breath. Let the words linger like embers glowing in the dark. Exhale the pride that seeks to rise. Inhale the peace that remains steady in surrender. Let humility wrap around you like evening air, soft and sure. For every season of victory carries its own quiet test, not of strength, but of remembrance. and only those who stay small before God can keep the peace He gives. The night grew deep and still again. A velvet calm spread across the land, the air heavy with peace and the faint scent of grain drying in the fields. Gideon sat outside his home beneath an olive tree, the stars bright and endless above him, their soft shimmer echoing the quiet thoughts within his heart. The years had passed gently since the battle. The people had known rest, laughter, harvests abundant and safe. The land healed where it once was scarred, and the songs that filled the evening air were no longer cries for deliverance, but hymns of gratitude. Yet as Gideon listened, a strange ache settled inside him. The ache that comes when one remembers how far they've been carried, and how easy it is to forget the one who carried them. He could feel it in the air, that faint drift of human hearts, slowly turning from dependence to comfort, from humility to pride. He whispered softly, "It always begins this way, doesn't it, Lord?" In the quiet after peace, when hearts begin to forget who gave it. His voice trembled slightly, a mixture of sorrow and prayer. He thought of the night when he had stood trembling in the winepress, hiding from fear, called mighty warrior by a God who saw beyond his weakness. He remembered the fire on the rock, the fleece wet with dew, the jars breaking under moonlight, the sound of trumpets rising like a prayer through the darkness. Every memory glowed within him like a candle, fragile, but still burning, each one a reminder that he had seen God move, that he had felt His strength fill the cracks of his fear, and that every breath of victory had been grace alone. He looked up at the stars and smiled softly. "They look the same," he murmured. "The same sky that watched me in my hiding, still watching now in peace, still faithful, even when we forget." Take a slow breath, in through the nose, calm and deep. Exhale softly. Let the heart ease. Let the mind grow still. Let gratitude move through you like light through leaves. Gentle, constant, sure. A faint breeze stirred, carrying the sound of distant laughter, the scent of the harvest, and the rustle of the olive leaves above him. Gideon bowed his head. "If ever they forget, remind them, Lord, through mercy, through memory, through the quiet voice that calls them home." He closed his eyes, the years heavy on his shoulders, yet his spirit light, for he knew he had done what was asked of him, not perfectly, but faithfully, and that was enough. The stars seemed to pulse in rhythm with his breath, and for a moment, the whole world felt like it was exhaling, resting, remembering. Take another slow breath. Exhale softly. Let the thought of legacy drift through your mind like a slow current. It is not our victories that endure, but our faith. Not our noise, but our trust. Not our names, but the peace we leave behind." Gideon whispered one last prayer into the night. "Let my story remind them that strength is not in the hand, but in the heart that trusts you. Let them remember that your power is gentle, and your peace everlasting." The wind carried the words away, blending them with the quiet hum of creation. And for the first time in many years, Gideon felt no fear, no striving, only rest. The peace that began in trembling now lived in him completely, a steady calm born of surrender. And the stars above seemed to whisper back the truth he had lived to learn. "It is not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit." Dawn unfolded softly, like a blessing whispered over the land. The first light touched the hills and olive trees, painting the world in gold and quiet warmth. The air was cool and still, the kind of morning that feels like peace made visible. Gideon sat beneath the same tree where the angel had once found him. Long ago, when fear had been his closest companion. Now, the years lay behind him like a river, winding and full, its waters carrying every doubt, every trembling prayer, every miracle that had shaped his heart. His hands rested loosely on his knees, his breath slow, his gaze turned toward the horizon where light met earth. The valley below shimmered in calm, fields green and full again, the sound of life rising with the sun, laughter in the distance, children calling, the faint rhythm of hammers and voices of men rebuilding. It was the sound of a people free. And Gideon's eyes grew wet with gratitude. He whispered softly, "You kept every promise. Even when I faltered, you turned my fear into strength, my smallness into your vessel, my doubt into testimony." The words trembled out like a final offering, carried by the morning air into the open sky. He thought of the jar that had broken, of the flame that had once burst from it and scattered the darkness. And he smiled, because now he understood that this was how faith always worked. Light through what is fragile, glory through what is broken, peace through what once was afraid. The breeze moved through the branches above him, the leaves rustling like a soft hymn. And Gideon closed his eyes, resting in the rhythm of it, in the quiet that spoke louder than any trumpet. Take a slow, deep breath. Inhale the warmth of this new morning. Exhale gently, letting every remnant of striving fade away. Let your heart rest in the same stillness that held Gideon at the end of his story. The years of fear and fight had passed, and what remained was not power, not fame, but peace. The kind of peace that cannot be taken by time or circumstance. The peace that begins when a soul finally trusts that God is enough. He lifted his face toward the light, eyes half closed, and whispered one last prayer. Let your strength remain among them, Lord. even when I am gone. Remind them that you choose the small. You dwell with the humble. You speak through the still. And you fight through peace. The wind rose gently, wrapping around him like an embrace, and the world seemed to exhale with him. The land, the trees, the sky itself resting in that holy silence. When the light grew brighter, Gideon smiled faintly, eyes soft with the quiet knowing of one who has seen the fullness of God's faithfulness. It was never my power, he breathed. It was always yours. And there, in that still moment between breath and eternity, peace settled over him completely. The same peace that had begun the night he was called, now finished in the dawn of rest. Take another slow breath. Let gratitude fill every corner of your being. Exhale softly, and let your spirit quiet. You are safe. You are seen. You are loved. The story of Gideon ends as all stories of faith do. Not in battle, but in peace. Not in victory's noise, but in the calm after obedience. In the quiet where God's power becomes the only sound worth hearing. Now rest in that same peace. The peace that called a frightened man from hiding. The peace that shone through broken jars. The peace that still whispers, "Be still, and know that I am God." Sleep now, in the assurance that His strength holds you too. Quietly, completely, eternally.